Before we begin the program tonight, I want to take a moment to acknowledge, as we always do, whether we're in person or online, that we in Seattle are on the historic and contemporary lands of the Duwamish, the Suquamish, and all Coast Salish people. We acknowledge the forced displacement of the Native community while honoring the endurance of the Duwamish people who still live here and have yet to receive federal recognition. I strongly urge you to visit the Duwamish Longhouse and Cultural Center if you haven't had a chance to be there to learn more. And I urge people also to reflect on the meaning of democracy in the context of the Duwamish's lack of federal recognition in 2020. It's important to note as well that we are living through a historic period of unprecedented protest against police violence towards Black people, protest that is in the grandest of democratic traditions, but which calls all of us to express unequivocally that Black lives matter. We at MOHAI are so honored to bring you tonight's program in collaboration with our longtime partner and colleagues, the Black Heritage Society of Washington State. Since the 1970s, the Black Heritage Society has done the essential work of preserving and sharing the story of Black people in our region and our state. And for decades, they've been an invaluable partner to MOHAI, where we share facilities, co-produce programs like this evening's, and most importantly, learn from each other. And here to introduce our speakers and get us started is the president of the Black Heritage Society, the beloved and tireless historian, community leader, and friend to everyone. Please welcome Stephanie Johnson-Toliver.
Thank you, Leonard. I love that, friend to everyone. I guess so. Hello. Okay. So hello, everyone. On behalf of the Black Heritage Society of Washington State, I want to welcome you here tonight to this democracy dialogue between two people that I have worked with in different capacities, but I'm very pleased to call both of them my friend. Each of them will share their opinions and insights and love for community that is centered around activism for social change. At the Black Heritage Society, we've been around since 1972, working hard at it, preserving the history of Black people. We invest our time and our preservation efforts to collect, maintain, and share the histories of people like our guests here tonight. It is my warm pleasure this evening to introduce them to you. So now we can, I think I'll just go ahead and do that right now so that we can get on with the dialogue. And once I've introduced them, I will rejoin them later to assist with navigating some of the questions that you posed throughout the evening. So it is my pleasure first to introduce to you Elmer Dixon. He is a longtime revolutionary activist with strong ties to Seattle and the Madrona neighborhood where he grew up. Inspired in the mid-60s after hearing Stokely Carmichael speak, Elmer joined SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, leading to his early activism as co-founder of the Black Student Union at Garfield High School, home of the Bulldogs, in 1967. In 1968, he co-founded the Seattle chapter Black Panther Party, the first chapter founded outside of Oakland, California. The Seattle chapter was courageous and unapologetic about their commitment to the Black Panther Party 10-point program, which our Seattle community benefited from with the free breakfast program, and they were catalysts for the Carolyn Downs Family Medical Center that still exists today in the heart of the Central area. Today, continuing his dedicated passion for change, Elmer has spent 34 years as a diversity consultant and is president of Executive Diversity Services. And second, I'd love to introduce to you Alani Seals, a beautiful Black Filipino woman from South Seattle. She and I first became acquainted in 2017 when I led a youth curator program with artist Aramis Hamer. Some of you may know that name and her art around town. that was a community history focused project, and Alani created a really thoughtful piece with a shout out to the Seattle chapter Black Panther Party free breakfast program. I'll always remember that, Alani. As a former APP Advanced Placement Program student, she was aware of educational inequities that impacted Black and Brown students. Alani, a 2020 University of Washington graduate, go Dogs, continues to use her life experiences and American ethnic studies knowledge to combat the oppression in our community, her community, and her private life. So welcome, Elmer and Alani. Really good to see you.
Thank you to have us. Yeah, I think this is a very interesting full circle moment for me, just because Stephanie, our work before, and then Elmer, I first met you at that exhibit actually. So that was really interesting. Not to mention that you grew up with my granddad, which I didn't know about until then, but yeah, it's a really nice full circle moment.
Right on.
Right.
It's my pleasure to be here this evening, and especially here to dialogue with a young activist, Alani, and I'm very familiar with that program out at the UW. I don't know if you were in any of the classes that I guest lectured in there, but I have guest lectured in the African American Studies program or the Ethnic Studies program there for a number of years running, and in fact gotten help from several students who have been interns of mine. I still have a couple of them now that are helping me finish my book. So it's a great program out there.
Yes, I had a lot of fun in it. I wish I was still in it, but everything comes to an end, so yeah.
Everything is in flux, a constant state of flux, as Huey used to teach us as we learned from some of the books that we read, Frantz Fanon. And the constant state of flux is that, you know, the change is evolving. So we go on to a new chapter in our life. So you've got exciting things in front of you.
Right, right.
Right. Well, I'm going to just let you two just go at it. I'm going to get off this screen, but I know we talked earlier about a little bit of the labels that people put on our activism. So I did want to present that to you kind of right off the top. And that is your opinions on the labels that people give us in terms of, are you a revolutionary? Are you a radical activist? Or are you a liberal reformer? So what do you think?
Yeah, that's an interesting, I'll go first just from a historical perspective. And it's a very interesting question. Before I get started too deeply, I want to give a shout out to my comrade, Naeem, who is on the, one of the chat boxes there, and also a good friend and supporter, Ellen Ferguson. Hey, Ellen, how you doing? I'm over here on the west side as well. I'm in Port Orchard. So, you know, the labels are an interesting thing. I often, when someone refers to myself or other Panthers, former Panthers, they like to introduce us as, or they write that we were civil rights activists. And that was kind of a broad label that was used coming out of the civil rights movement. And I like to correct them by letting them know that we came on the heels of the civil rights movement when the Black Power movement emerged in the mid 1960s with H. Rap Brown and Stokely Carmichael, who came to Seattle and fired us up at Garfield, and the likes of those two, and you know, and James Brown actually kind of kicked it off with his song "I'm Black and I'm Proud." So when the party emerged, we were not swept up in some illusion or delusion, really, that we were going to be part of the political process or the political system. Although, if you talk to Chairman Bobby, he will tell you that they started the party when he and Huey started the party. It was to build a political party, a Black political party that represented the needs of Black people. But clearly, we were revolutionaries, and when we look at those times, you know, of course, the powers that be they labeled us militants, or if Giuliani was around, he'd label us a terrorist. We were none of those things, and while you could say we were activists, I like what you said, Stephanie, revolutionary activists. Clearly, the scope of our movement was to fight for the rights of all oppressed people, and it went beyond civil rights to human rights to God-given rights, and by any means necessary. And so I think that, most people that are labeled this or labeled that throw off the labels, and we certainly didn't accept any of the labels that were thrown on us.
Right. I think from my perspective, I studied the Black Panther Party, and just to, be talking to someone that was a living part of that, for me, it doesn't feel right for me to call myself an activist or a revolutionary activist. I understand that because I've put in, so much work, I've been given that title, but for me, it was never about a title. Coming up in my educational path, I was one of maybe 5 Black students in the entire track. So throughout that, I realized all the different inequities and inequalities that I had to face, but also just the inequality of the system. Just because APP, it was a program that you either had to be placed into after you tested, or your parents could pay into it. And there's several different issues with that, but I think given that, I was put in a kind of weird position. Just because as a student, I didn't see myself any different, but being the only Black student in the program, of course, came, with its own issues. And I was definitely the type, my parents raised me to be the type to call out different inequities, and, use my voice and speak for what was right. So I think to this day, but really when I was in school still, I definitely got the title of, angry Black girl, or, social justice activist and things like that. But for me, it was never about a title. It's just my livelihood. And I think still, even though, generations have changed, the vanguard has changed, a lot of these issues still hold today.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that angry Black girl or angry Black woman. In my work as a diversity consultant, and we do a lot of work around understanding culture and different communication styles and other things that make us who we are. And often because Black people, along with other populations, in fact, most of the rest of the globe are what we would call attached communicators that speak with emotion and passion. The angry Black woman syndrome has nothing to do with a movement. It has to do with the fact that you're Black and you appear to be angry because you speak with passion and emotion. But those types of labels run deep in American culture. They run deep in businesses and organizations that don't understand differences across style. And so that's a very important label to at least discuss. And of course, you being, you said you're not sure about the label, an activist, a young revolutionary. I like to think of you as a young revolutionary. I like the tam on your head.
Thank you.
And I think that whatever people may refer to you as, the important thing is that you know who you are, and what you stand for. There were a lot of people that claimed to be revolutionaries in the era that the party was around, but very quickly, we gave out a couple of labels to people that weren't doing anything. We called them armchair revolutionaries. We even had labels for Panthers that were not in step or didn't want to go to do the work. See, when we first started the chapter here, we were in a very interesting era, and I'll talk about that in a moment, because we're going to talk about the differences in movements. But overnight, the party grew. When we met Bobby Seals, Chairman Bobby, in Oakland in '68, the party was a local organization in California, and it centered around a couple of chapters: Southern California chapter and Central Headquarters. And when little Bobby Hutton was murdered, 2 days after MLK was murdered, those were both like pivotal, cataclysmic events. And the community came out in droves. And of course, there were, several days where people were, lighting up the country after MLK was assassinated. But little Bobby, who was the first member to join the Black Panther Party, who was 16 years old when he joined and 17 when he was murdered in the streets while he was in police custody. It just lit a match. And the party in Oakland grew exponentially in the next couple of days. And when we became the first chapter and came back to Seattle, the word got out as 20 or 30 of us met in my parents' home. Within days, we had 400 Panthers, but they didn't understand what it really meant to be a Panther. And so the label that many of them got was Rally Panthers, because they showed up, to march and to drill, showed up to the rallies. But when it came to do the work in the community, that narrowed down very quickly. So we gave out labels too. So I think, and again, I don't think people seek out labels. We didn't seek out the label as to be called revolutionaries, but we knew that in that time, revolution in our minds was what was called for, a need to shift the dynamic, to change the status quo. We didn't grow, while I grew up in the era of King and marched with King when he came here to Seattle when I was 12, 13 years old, the philosophy of turn the other cheek never sunk in with most of my generation. Malcolm X was our hero. And Malcolm said that if someone slaps you on the cheek, slap him back. And that was it was the neighborhood I grew up in, on the playground. You'd get bullied if you let somebody slap you and didn't slap them back. And not that we were violent. It's important to understand the difference between violence and self-defense. In fact, the first name of the Black Panther Party was the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense. So if I kind of go into this dialogue around how the different eras, have shifted or look or feel, the feeling of the civil rights movement. Those of us that were around then remember looking at black and white TVs and seeing the marches on Washington and seeing the demonstrations in Alabama and seeing these, the Bloody Sunday on the Pettus Bridge and the cops beating, the people, with billy clubs and shooting them with fire hoses and sicking police dogs on them. I remember vividly when the 16th Street Baptist Church was bombed and hearing the cries of the little girls, mothers who had lost their daughters, realizing they would never see them again. And we were in an era of assassination. And so the movement, the civil rights movement, it felt to me that they were fighting what almost appeared to be a losing battle because they were getting beat and slaughtered in the streets. The students that traveled there to work on voter registration in the South that were slaughtered and their bodies found a few days later. It just felt like there was this constant cloud hanging over the country. And when the era of the Panther came into being, it was not just the era of the Panther, but it was all across the country. People were pissed and upset and mad and wanting to fight back and wanting to do something. I heard a song the other day that reminded me of that era. What a day for the heat, 1,000 people in the street, everybody carrying signs, mostly saying hooray for our side. Everybody stop, listen, look what's going down. You could always hear, there was always there were always songs of the time that were either revolutionary songs or political activist songs or anti-war songs. And the country was in this whole different mood. And, when the party emerged, it was like, we were emerging from the rubble of the civil rights movement. No disrespect to the civil rights movement, but we were emerging from that rubble, and we were standing up to demand, freedom, demand justice, and we were prepared to take it. And it had a very different feel to it because I know at least in the party, and I know it wasn't just us, that organizations were ready to die. People were ready to die within those organizations. When Huey's first book came out, it was called To Die for the People. And his second book was called Revolutionary Suicide. And, as a 17-year-old and soon 18-year-old, having two bodyguards, carrying a weapon, that photo that you saw of me sitting on the desk in the opening scene there, I was sitting in the Panther office, and I know I had under one arm, I probably had a 357, and in the other arm, I probably had a 45. But that was the time that we lived in. We were not playing around. We were not, asking for anything. But it was really give me liberty or give me death.
I think that's the main thing that I noticed, because for us right now, the movement is the Black Lives Matter movement. And that's not to say that it's not a powerful movement, because I think that on a national and global scale, it's definitely brought a lot of light to, different issues that Black Americans face and other Black folks across the globe. But there isn't that feeling and sentiment of give me liberty or give me death. And I'm willing to really die behind this. Of course, we see certain people have that sort of mentality, but me and my friends, we don't try to romanticize the revolution, because we know that when it comes time for it to actually happen, we have to really put our lives behind what we believe in. And I think that's one of the similarities between our generations, just because we're pretty similar in age, to where before, during your time, you had to have that same sentiment, and I have that same sentiment right now. It's just a matter of really organizing and, putting things into action, because if I were the leader of a movement like that, I would say no more asking, like, we got to take it. I don't see our demands being met just because on the surface level, it might look okay. We've had a Black president, we have Black basketball teams, we're integrated, physically integrated, but I think these issues run a lot deeper than the surface level, just because the same systemic issues are coming up, whether that be, prison abolition or police brutality and things like that. And both of the movements still, both the Black Power movement and the Black Lives Matter movement are having to bring awareness to and trying to solve these same issues. And it's been generations, between both of them.
You're right about that. The issues have come back around. They've actually never gone away.
Right.
The police shootings in the street are not new. They were happening then, which is why we started. Our very first program was a police alert patrol, where we openly patrolled police armed with shotguns and law books to make sure that we could defend the community and make sure that they were not, they were being held responsible if they did murder someone in the street. But it was interesting during that time that we had our police alert patrols, that no people were killed in the community during that time, because we were out there. But I think it's important when I look at today's movement, and I'd like to acknowledge that I think that what I have seen from this recent push is that young people are, they are demanding. I don't know if they're demanding give me liberty or give me death, but it feels like it. And it feels like they have gone further than they've gone before. I know when the Black Lives Matter began, 10, 15 years ago, however long it's been around, that it didn't seem like anything was going to really happen. In fact, nothing did really happen. But this time around, Alani, these young people have been in the streets constantly, and not, aside from the scattered violence that you've seen in burning, and there are maybe a couple of groups that may be responsible for that. I'm one of those that believe from experience and know from experience that some of that probably is being perpetuated by the government, to make the Black Lives Matter look bad. I wouldn't doubt if it was some of those people throwing Molotov cocktails were FBI agents or plants. But the movement itself, the demands that people made. I mean, you saw some change already. You've seen it. You've seen the police budget reduced by, I don't know, a couple of $1 million or more. You've seen the police chief resign. Unfortunately, I thought that she should have stayed. In fact, just before this recent explosion in the last election, I think it was it 2 years ago, when there was a law passed that was pushed by I think some Black Lives Matter activists and other local activists to change how police officers can get away with, when they shoot someone. I forget that law, but Stephanie, maybe you remember that law that was just passed in our legislature here a couple of years ago. And there's a push for, the interesting thing, there's this push for community control of police. That was one of our original programs in the Black Panther Party. The first two programs that we started, Police Alert Patrol and Community Control of Police. And we continued to push for that community control of police with review boards that had teeth, that were made up of citizens. The Citizen Review Board, a return to community policing. The thing that we almost got that on the ballot here in the state of Washington in the late 70s. And the thing that was a barrier was the fact that part of our program required any cops that were patrolling in our community needed to live there. And cops didn't want to live in the community in which they patrolled. I dare say that if that cop that shot Tamir Rice lived in that community and knew that kid's parents and grandparents and aunts and uncles and cousins, that he would not have killed that boy like that.
Right.
So I do see some movement, and it looks different. I don't expect, you are a young revolutionary. I don't expect you to be in the street with a M16 and the shotgun shell strapped to your chest, because we're in a different era. The police are militarized. We live in a electronic, social media era, and so there's different weapons that you can use, which is in fact how the George Floyd video became so explosive, because we live in this social media era, the era of cell phone cameras, and those are new weapons today. And so the struggles are the same. I think we had a broad coalition. In fact, Fred Hampton, there's a movie coming out about Chairman Fred, who was murdered brutally in Chicago, along with Mark Clark, the chairman of the head of the Peoria chapter of the Illinois. A lot of people forget that fact, but he was the one who coined the phrase and originated Rainbow Coalition. And we had coalitions with young white activists, Latino activists, Asian American activists. In fact, we had one of our members, our early members, was Mike Tagawa, a member of the Japanese community, the LGBT plus community, the Native American community. We had broad coalitions. We had groups and organizations in as far as away as New Zealand Black Panther Party, a chapter in London, England, and support groups in Denmark and Sweden and Japan and the People's Republic of China. And so when I think about today's movement and Black Lives Matter, I think that there has been a broad coalition. When you look out and you look at the demonstrations, the people in the street, those weren't all Black people. There was a lot of people. I remember seeing a sign, Asians for Black Lives Matter. And so, I think that some of the organizing tactics need to be the same, and you have to have some new stuff. But I do see some movement. I'm encouraged by it.
No, there's definitely movement. Yeah. I think it's interesting that you brought up the Rainbow Coalition because from my studies, we call it, I believe it's called horizontal alliances, which is basically the same thing. So people that are positioned similarly in society will work to support each other. And I've seen that throughout, my studies in school and just on an everyday basis. Me and my friends, my main friend group, it's me, another Black girl, and then one Filipino girl and two Vietnamese girls. And although we might not all be the same on a racial and ethnic tip, we do still talk about the similarities and differences between our communities. And I love the fact that we grew up in Seattle. Seattle at one time was one of the most diverse places in the nation. I believe it was the 98108. And I grew up in that area. So I'm thankful to have all of those experiences. And I'm thankful to say that I fight not only for my community, but for other communities too. And I think that's one power that you said was definitely social media, just because during your time, it wasn't as easy to transmit information or hold other people accountable. But nowadays, I feel like a lot of activism for me too is, emailing officials or calling officials, organizing things online that people can participate in. Yeah, so I don't know. I think it's very much the same, but also very different. I feel like when I think about activism today, a lot of it is about self-care and preserving ourselves. And I think Stephanie kind of posed this question to us before, but like, what does activism look like, on an individual basis, on a daily basis? And I think it's really important for especially young people like me to really preserve ourselves. Because at the end of the day, the government, it's out to get us in so many different ways. And so just to be here alive right now, I don't have COVID, thank God. My family's safe, we're all safe. I think that's really important too at the end of the day. But I don't know, a lot of my friends have just created really cool spaces for each other to take care of ourselves and just really build community outside of, quote unquote politics, even though at the same time it's still very political just because we're thriving at the same time. But yeah, I don't know, there's so many different collectives that I've seen and are a part of that have created, these spaces to just have fun and live. I think that's another thing too that people don't realize is that activists, quote unquote activists, we still have lives outside of the work that we do. And it's really important, to still preserve those spaces. So
I'm really glad to hear that, because that is so critical. And we lived in very dangerous times in the era of the Panther, because J. Edgar Hoover named us the #1 threat to the internal security of the United States in 1968. And then he launched through his infamous memo through the COINTEL program, counterintelligence program, to destroy, discredit, and disrupt activities of what he called Black hate groups, and prevent the rise of a Black Messiah. And so we were targeted for assassination. And so our self-care looked very different than your self-care, because we were the hunted. We had, our offices were fortified with sandbags and steel and plywood sandwiches on the window. We had gas masks. We had thousands of rounds of ammunition in our offices with multiple weapons, because we knew they were coming to kill us. We knew they were coming to get us. And today you're still under attack, but it's different. And these collectives that you spoke to are so vital, so important. Our collective had to be, as Panthers, we had to be very careful about who we let in our close inner circle, because as you will see in the Fred Hampton movie, and you can actually see a documentary on Fred Hampton right now, that our ranks were infiltrated by FBI agents. And so we had to be very cautious. And even with all of the caution that we took, Fred Hampton's bodyguard was an agent. One of my bodyguards was an agent. I didn't find out until 40 years later.
wow.
And fortunately for myself, as a result of him, I saw, as I look back, the times that I could have been assassinated because of some of the stuff that this cat was doing. But even then, I didn't let him too close to me. Even though he was one of my bodyguards, he wasn't one of my trusted bodyguards. I had others that were very close. This guy was trying to weasel his way in, but it was a very dangerous time for us. And for you, you have a whole different kind of danger, and it's very dangerous. You know, this uptick of the far right. You've got idiots like Giuliani on Fox News calling Black Lives Matter terrorists, and inflaming these idiots. And so, you know, there's a real threat. You don't see broadly the type of attacks that were, you know, happening, you know, against the party, because, you know, when they attacked our offices, we shot back. And so, of course, that drew a lot of attention. And they knew that they were going to have to catch us off guard. Aaron, one afternoon when he went out to the gun range without me, I usually took the comrades out to a target practice, and I was on some assignment, and he went out, and someone, we don't know who, some agent, had stuffed his shotgun shells with explosives. And fortunately, he didn't fire from the shoulder. I'd always told the brothers, you know, and sisters, when you use a shotgun, fire from the hip, not the shoulder. And he told me he was about to fire from the shoulder, and he said, nah, and then he moved it down to his hip, and it almost blew his arm off. Had it been next to his head, it would have killed him.
Right.
And so those were the kinds of things that were happening, and we were never fearful. We just knew that they were coming. If they were coming, we were ready for them. But I'm glad that you have this in current movement, and you and your comrades and your friends have these collectives where you're doing self-care, and because make no mistake, you're on somebody's list somewhere. You and your friends who are doing the hard work, the work that you're doing today, you're being targeted somewhere. Someone's got you on a list, and you need to do that self-care. I'm glad to hear that you're doing that.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I think that's one of the dangers too that we have to face being in an age of social media, is the ways in which, you know, our social media and phones and computers can be infiltrated. I wouldn't necessarily say that I know it for a fact, but sometimes when I talk to my family or friends about certain topics, my phone will like cut off or it'll stop working or things like that. I'm like, okay, guys, I know what you're doing. But yeah, that's one danger that I do have to think about. Then also, I feel like when people think about I guess brutality against Black and brown bodies and Black and brown people, I feel like people think a lot about it having to do with the South, and not necessarily that it happens up here. But as we've seen in the past years, there's been a lot of police brutality and other instances of far right abuse in the Pacific Northwest. And I feel like if there's anyone watching that isn't from the Pacific Northwest, I think it's really important to bring up that same violence does happen up here. It's just not as overt as it might be in other locations around the US. And I think for me too, just as a Black woman that is an older sister to other, younger siblings, I have a 15-year-old brother and an 8-year-old brother. It's kind of scary just because I'm not worried about myself. I'm sure other people are worried about me, but I'm really worried about them. In the past couple of weeks, Kuwan Charles was lynched, and that hasn't necessarily made any sort of national news. And how he was murdered was in a pretty similar fashion to Emmett Till. And I think that's really scary that things like that are still happening in our country and around the world. So these are just things I have to keep at the back of my mind because my brother's 15 also. And even though the violence might not be as overt up here, it's definitely still here. We still have people like Proud Boys and, other far right groups. So yeah, just have to stay aware.
Yeah, I wanted to add something about that, Alani, because the treachery is even more sinister than just what we see in terms of these shootings that happen on the street or someone being pulled away and lynched. There's a lot of Native women that have disappeared, a lot of Black women that have disappeared, and whether they've been snatched to be sex slaves or whatever the reason is, they're being snatched. But the other sinister piece is what's happening. It's kind of this evolution of the prison system, and the fact that we here in the United States we have the highest prison population in the world, and 40% of those over 2 million people that are in prisons, whatever the number is some astronomical number. For 40% of them are Black, and that's not by accident. That's not because Black people are more prone to violence or prone to being criminals. It is the systemic racism that has been going on for years that have put Black and brown people in a position where they can be thrown into prisons. From the irregularity in prison sentences, the disproportionate prison sentences for use of powder cocaine as opposed to crack cocaine, and
policies,
yeah,
window policies.
Yeah, and I want to point out one other thing, because there's a lot of talk, and there should be some talk about what happens within our own communities in Black on Black violence or Black on Black crime. You often hear people say, bring that up, and I think a lot of right-wing folks bring that up. Well, you killing more yourselves than the police are at a higher rate. Yeah, well, there was if you look at it, there was a documentary that came out in the late 1980s by HBO. It's called The Fire Next Time. And they were interviewing the head of the Crips. And the Crips, the head of the Crips said that when the Panther leadership was wiped out in Southern California, because that was deliberate, that was on purpose. They killed Bunchy Carter and John Huggins in January of 1969. I was at both of their funerals. And then the person that they appointed next, the party that Bobby appointed to take their place, was Elmer Geronimo Pratt, another close comrade of mine, who was then framed up for the murder of a white couple playing tennis in California. He spent the next 25 years in prison until Johnny Cochran got his case thrown out. Bunchy Carter had been head of the largest gang in Southern California, the Slawsons. And so that's why J. Edgar Hoover targeted him through Maulana Ron Karenga, who they say created Kwanzaa. That was a payment for killing Bunchy and John. John Huggins was Erica Huggins' husband. And Bunchy was, the Slawsons were a 5,000 strong gang organization. And they were fearful that Bunchy was going to organize these 5,000 gang members into revolutionaries. So he was assassinated first. And the reason why they got Fred later that year is because Fred had the two biggest gangs in Chicago call a truce, the Black Gangster Disciples and the Blackstone Rangers, because he was uniting them. So they went after those two leaders. And so the guy that started the Crips said that when the Panther leadership was wiped out, the gangs splintered. They didn't have any leadership, and they didn't know, what they were going to do. And he said one night he went down to the rail yards in Watts, because there's a big rail yard that runs through Watts. Anybody that's been down in LA knows this rail yard. And it was common knowledge that the rail yard would not leave cars that had, any merchandise in them, TVs or whatever, because they would disappear overnight. They knew so somebody come in there and take them. And so one Saturday night, some rail cars pulled up, bunch of rail cars pulled up and just stopped, and they were left overnight. And he said, so they went in, late at night, opened the car doors, and he said every weapon that you could ever think of was inside the first two sets of rail cars. Uzis, M16s, AK-47s, handguns, every kind of weapon you can think of. And the next set of cars were all the ammunition for the weapons. So that was not by accident.
Right.
They deliberately armed the gangs, and at that same time, they were flooding the Black community with crack cocaine. So they launched they launched this government, this system launched the drug wars, the gang wars, the bloody wars that you saw that still continue to this day. In Chicago, 600 young black men are killed, and brown men and women are killed every year, at least 600. It's because they launched the drug wars. They set it up. They put it in motion. So they either put them in jail or they get them to kill one another, get us to kill one another. So this prison industrial complex, I know you probably read the book, The New Jim Crow, that talks about it, how that's the sinister side of what this system is doing to a whole generation of black and brown kids. So it's much more than the shooting in the street, the George Floyd or the Breonna Taylor. It's much more, much deeper, and much more sinister.
Yeah, and to add on to that too, like just from my studies with education, because a lot of my efforts have been around education, knowing that the school to prison pipeline is a huge part of that complex. Because in my educational track, I was fortunate enough to be in an environment where I didn't have to worry about what I had to eat, or things like that, worry about money and things like that. But as I grew older, usually, yeah, towards the end of high school, I saw a couple of my peers, they would fall off and they might not show up, for a couple months. They might not come back to school at all. But I think that's also a huge part of it, just because the youth is such an integral part to this nation. For them to use school as a weapon like that is really hard to imagine, but it definitely happens. And I think that's why it's really important to reform, especially education, just because these systems aren't inherently bad, but because of what they've turned into, they are pretty bad. So I hope that myself, along with other people on this call, can work towards that as well in education.
That's a good way, a little segue for me, Alani. I can't believe, where our time is going here, because I could sit here and listen to this conversation and I keep wanting to like jump in like, yeah, right on, all power. But there are a few questions that are coming in to the Q&A, and Jana Stepp had asked a question about the social media aspect, and you touched on that a little bit, Alani, so that was really great. And the other questions are about this whole intergenerational exchange and what you're doing right now, Elmer, from your end, and then Alani, what are you doing to come together to, create the activism that you want to see?
Well, let me just say from my end, I'm not creating any activism. These young people have taken the mantle. They don't need to create it because the conditions are out there. They're creating their own movement. My role, I see my role.
Mentoring.
Well, it's mentoring and inspiring. I was looking at Ellen's comment here. She says she was thanking me for continuing to educate and inspire. I guest lecture at the University of Washington, at the University in Finland, and high schools in Finland, high schools here in Seattle, colleges across the country. I've got many of my other comrades. Naeem, who's on the line tonight, talks at schools. Our role is to make sure that they understand, what the party was about, the fact that we had a 10-point program. I can't, several years ago when Black Lives Matter started, what dismayed me about the Black Lives Matter was they had no foundation and no program. And I would tell them, I said, look, you need to have a foundation and a program, because the 10-point program guided everything that we did. And today they have a program in place. So maybe someone listened out, maybe they figured it out on their own. But my role as a 70-year-old Panther is to make sure that that people understand what our struggle was, not to make the same mistakes, but also to learn from the successes and the foundations that we had. I encourage people to read. When we joined the party, Bobby told us as new Panthers, you have to read 2 hours a day, go to PE classes, that's political education, and own 2 weapons and 1,000 rounds of ammunition. And so we educated ourselves. We read constantly. We had PE classes every week, twice a week. And so reading and understanding, yeah, your enemy, and sizing up, what the struggle is, making sure people that are young people are aware of doing those things, and the self-care that Alani talked about, they're doing it, and so my role is, and other former Panthers and other revolutionaries' role is to pass down what information we can, but it's their time. They're going to lead, and we just get out of the way and let them go for it. Give them as much encouragement and information as we can.
Yeah,
Right,
I think,
Alani?
yeah, I think that's pretty much the page that I'm at too. I feel like I'm very grateful to have elders like Elmer still in the community and still active. And it's just a really great reminder that the movement, it can't stop and you really can't give up. Longevity is a really important part of the movement. And I think for me, that's what I try to push because especially in the age of social media with constant information flowing, it's really easy to get burned out. But I just think it's really important to keep pushing forward. I don't know, maybe a revolution will happen in the next 5 years, maybe in the next year. I'm not really sure. Maybe I'll make it to Elmer's age and be in the same position. I'm not really sure, but it's just really important to keep pushing forward.
Okay, I have one final question for you two, and I'm making sure I don't miss anything here in the Q&A. But the individual call to action doesn't look the same for everyone. And earlier, you mentioned Elmer, you said something about armchair revolutionaries, but for me, I'm asking. I mean, there's no shame in whatever level you choose. Am I right? There's space for all types of activism. What do you think, and how do you encourage those big and small moves for anyone who might be listening here, or we can share out?
Yeah, let me start by saying, and the term armchair revolutionary, and we didn't mince our words back then. You know that, Stephanie.
Right.
We called it the way we saw it. And if someone was spouting revolution, but not doing anything, today we call that talking the talk, but not walking the talk, right? And so that's what that was about. People that were trying to, sit up like they were, like they were all this big bad dude or whoever, and they weren't doing a diddly squat. And we always made sure that, we were 24/7. There was no pause. We were 24/7 Panthers, from sun up to sundown, and even beyond sundown, as we had guard duty every night. And I didn't expect anybody that would have that same level of commitment that we had. I think everybody played a role. The welfare mothers who got up and helped us cook breakfast, the business owner that donated eggs and bread, Gay's Bakery, Henry Gay's gave us, thousands of loaves of bread over the course of, the 14 years that we were feeding over 2,000 kids a week in the 5 breakfast programs that we ran across the city. Everybody played some role, at least in connection with us. And that we weren't the only thing obviously going on. There were other movements that were moving and other people were doing things. And so there's a lot of different ways, like you said, Stephanie, that people can play a role, and you have to choose, your path. Alani was talking about self-preservation. Self-preservation is also about not trying to do it all. You can't cover all angles. You have to choose, the battle that you want to, the hill you want to die on, so to speak, the battle that you want to fight. And we respected other people's movements and other people's battles and the fights that they had. When young whites would come to us and say that they wanted to join the Black Panther Party, we said, no, you can't join the Black Panther Party, but you got enough work to do in your own community. Here's, get out there and do something about it. There was a white organization down in that was in a coalition with a party down in the South called the Patriot Party, and there was another group out of Chicago and New York called the Young Lords. They had their own movement. They had their own identity and their own passion. And so there's room for, for any kind of passion. But I'm still going to stand on the fact, Stephanie, that if you're talking and ain't doing diddly squat, I almost cursed there on the show here. I'm sorry, but I held it back. If you're not doing diddly squat, then you need to get up and move. You need to do something.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think for me, even though I do try to be involved in, other communities, my main focus is the Black community. And within that, I do try to focus on the youth. And like Elmer said, everybody plays a different role. I just think it's very helpful to give where you can, especially in terms of white allyship. I feel like in terms of white allyship, a lot of times people think about it being as like a form of reparations. And if you want to think about it that way, it's completely okay, but just know that you don't have to necessarily pay somebody to, pay reparations. If you have a skill that you can teach somebody for free, a person of color for free, that's very helpful. If you can give somebody a ride, buy somebody lunch, all of these things definitely add up. So if you have the means to do that, do that. But like I said too, it's not necessarily about being political or getting out in the streets, although it very much is in other aspects. But yeah, I don't know. There's so many cool places in Seattle that create space for different folks of color. One of my favorites is Estelita's Library. If you guys are familiar, it's on Beacon Hill. Edwin has done a really great job of curating a collection of books that you can educate yourself with. You can buy one, for a family member or a friend, things like that. Of course, always support POC businesses of color. There's a bunch of those in Seattle too. Attend your local events, support, your local museums and things of the sort. So yeah, there's many different ways to be an activist, and it's not necessarily, getting out on the street and protesting, but in all aspects, it is a form of protest.
Right. We are getting really close to our end time, but I don't want to ignore a question in the Q&A that's coming back around. And Elmer, it is directed to you. I don't know if you had an opportunity to see it, but it was asking if you could speak to the specific dangers of neoliberalism, particularly pushed forward by the Wall Street Party, and designated to enter the White House with crime bill champion Joe Biden at its helm.
Well, that's a lot. That's a lot to that question.
Yeah.
I think you have to be cautious and aware of, kind of this neoliberalism, that's kind of scattergun. I call it scattergun politics. Where there's not a central focus that's tied back to, the reality of our condition. If there's not meaningful and real change, you have to be aware of that. There were a lot of groups that were kind of neo-political in our time, and some of them we denounced. We weren't afraid to speak out against them, and others of them, we corrected, and said, here's a better path. But I think you have to be aware of those things. I'm not aware of this Wall Street group. I'll tell you that I during the election, there was, while all of the feces was flying, I stayed out of the way of the flying feces, and kept my focus, because there was so much of it, and it's still going on. So this Wall Street group I'll have to take a look at, but I think that you have to observe them with a careful eye and make sure that they are not subverting the movement, because in essence, that's what they can do easily, is subvert the movement.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I want to thank everyone who was putting questions into the Q&A, and maybe we didn't hit right on answering your question, but I think we got around it. So I hope you were enjoying this conversation as much as I have. And I don't know, we're going to have to do Elmer and Allani .2, or, version 2, 2.0, something here, because we're not finished. And I hope that someday we'll be able to sit around, across the table or face to face from one another at the Seattle Chapter Black Panther Party Library and Reading Room, that I hope that we'll hear something about someday soon. And So thank you two so much for taking your time to come out and talk to us and join us in this dialogue. And I'm going to have to say, love you, all power. Let's do it again. And I'm going to bring Leonard Garfield back on the screen to say a few words and before we sign off here tonight. But love you too and can't wait to see you.
Love you, Stephanie.
Okay.
Thank you.
Stephanie.
Well, thank you, Stephanie, and a special thanks to Alani and Elmer. So much history tonight between generations across so many years. Really, we so deeply appreciate you sharing tonight. And that was a real conversation, so that made me feel really good. Thank you, guys. Well, thank you, everyone who joined us this evening. We're so appreciative you took time out from your busy evening. If you'd like to see more images related to some of the topics we discussed this evening, check out mohai.org, our website, and look for the photo search. There's some great history there, some of which we talked about tonight. And don't forget to check out the exhibit, which we call Stand Up Seattle, the Democracy Project. It's online, and very soon we hope it will be in person when you can join us safely. I do want to thank our lead exhibit individual sponsor, Maureen Frisch, who is joining us this evening as well. All of this, the programs, the exhibit, the participation of everybody this evening is such important work, and we really appreciate it. Our next Democracy Dialogue is coming up next month, December 12th, and it's called Schooling the Public. And I know I have a lot to learn, and the public has a lot to learn, so we're going to talk about that. Schooling the Public, that's on December 12th, and there's more information on our website. If you've enjoyed the work we do or you've learned something new, please consider becoming a member of MOHAI. It's how we keep going, and we also welcome your gift if you're able to do that. But we so much appreciate your support, your participation, and we know that we're not open to be with you in the same way we always are, but you've been so helpful to allow us to have these conversations remotely, and we know we'll have conversations in person soon. As you exit Zoom, you're going to see our website pop up, our donation page, and feel free to visit mohai.org for more information. Well, thanks again to the Black Heritage Society, to For Culture, our sponsors, to Alani and Elmer and Stephanie for the amazing conversation. Good evening, stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll see you soon. Good night.